Okay, everybody, welcome to the fourth and final session of Aarhus Symposium 2015, following the Smarter Cities track. Please let me welcome back the moderator from the first session, Associate Professor at Aarhus University, Martin Brydskov.
Thank you. Can you hear me in this thingy? I'm sorry, just sound checking. Welcome back. We're almost all here. How many of you were in the previous session with Simon Giles? Pretty much all of you. Good. So you're the Smart Cities people here. You know who I am then? Then let me just quickly say a practical thing. So our speaker today needs to leave at 1:45. So we have 3 quarters. So let's be a little bit efficient. And in that spirit, I'll give the word to Jens-Peter Saul, who is the CEO of, I would say, in the top 3 of Danish smart city companies. So if you want to do something smart cities, you always have to consider what would Ramboll say. So please, what would you say?
Thank you. Thank you. It's a true pleasure being here. I do apologize that this is a little bit under time pressure. I'm hosting a gala event tonight, and I've got 200 guests waiting for me. So I really need to leave punctually, and I've told the guys to drag me out if I get carried away, because I love getting carried away. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity to speak to you, because talent, young talent, future talent is something that is most important to me. I would like to introduce very quickly myself, who I am. My name is Jens-Peter Saul. I know the name sounds very Danish. I'm not. And if you want to talk to me in Danish, it will be a very simple talk on the level of a 3-year-old. I'm an engineer by background, as you can see, actually an energy engineer, and I've worked quite a lot of my life there in that field. I've studied at the University of Hanover in Germany, and started then very early in Siemens power generation at that time, developing large-scale power stations in the Middle East, and I then became head of that business for the Middle East. Later on, then ran a larger business, became managing director for the power generation in the UK, for Europe, Northern Europe, and then I became exposed to Denmark by becoming the CEO of Siemens Wind Power at that time, located in Brande. And I worked there, and then I got approached from this fantastic company called Ramboll. And I first didn't quite know who they were, and I had a look, and I said, this is fantastic, I will do it. So I then moved over to Ramboll, and I don't know if they've yet recovered from the shock of having a German CEO. I think so, but I've been there since, and we've had a fantastic development. Who are we in brief? We are, obviously, as you know, an independent engineering consultancy company. We're foundation-owned, so very traditional Danish in that sense. We're now globally 13,000 experts globally in 300 offices and in Northern Europe, but most recently we've grown globally quite significantly and expanded also into the US, into Asia, Australia, and all those other countries. We're now, and this number actually I just noticed is quite a little bit old because we acquired a larger company. We're 1.4 billion in revenue. We are in the sectors of buildings, transport, environment, water, energy, oil and gas, and management consulting, and urban planning and design. And I like that because it's a great combination, because we cover basically all the engineering disciplines we need to have a multidisciplinary, holistic view. But we especially like combining it with our management consulting, so that we actually also have the social economic competence that we can combine with that. And that is very important. That is actually one of the elements that makes us so successful if we look at consulting cities, how to develop. Because an infrastructure for itself has to be successful the way that it's embedded into society, and if it really is to fill its purposes. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Just a quick outlook of the direction that the company is going. When I came, we designed a new strategy. It's what you do when you become a CEO, and we called it Stronger Together. And The first element was really saying, how do we become strong and really ensure that in those markets where we are strong, that nobody can attack us. Because the global consulting world is consolidating very fast. And we are one of the biggest in the Nordics when we say nobody should be bigger than us at home, and therefore we will strengthen us here. But then we said we want to actually balance our portfolio better, and we want to go out into the wide world and go into new places, and we identified specifically the Americas, because we said, where is it actually the services that we offer that make us so unique? And that is specifically in the environmental space. If the world looks at Denmark or the Nordics, they see green technology, sustainable and livable societies. And they want that. Not everybody wants it to the same degree, and not everybody wants to pay for it the same degree. So we then said, let's go to those places that value that most. And therefore, we expanded into America and selected areas in Asia that also have the same ambitions that Denmark has, or similar ambitions that Denmark has, and the Nordics. And the last one, and that's where we come to build the bridge, is where we said, let's develop and capitalize a sustainable society platform. Because we had one ambition, we actually bundle this competence, we strengthen this, we expand it, and then we bring it to the world and talk about it. I have to say, the Danish nature is to be very humble. That is good, but sometimes also bad, because you do so great things here. And if you want to sell it, you have to talk about it. And that's what we started doing. So we started to systematically develop it and talk about it. And we said we want to be the sustainable society consultant. And this has been a fantastic success. I actually, it's been so overwhelming that we can hardly follow the requests that we have now to speak globally, including at the UN, the World Economic Forum and other places, because the people see we have something to offer. And it has actually had also a great success on the development of our company. Since then, we've grown by 60% in the last 3.5 years. I think that is a good growth by everybody's perspective. And this is where we are placed globally now, a true global company, moving from a Scandinavian presence to a European presence and now globally. I will jump in the matter of time, because I'm told to leave more time for questions, our sectors and where we are. I mentioned them before, but we do great projects, and that's what it's all about. From the future link between Germany and Denmark, the Fehmarn Tunnel, or the big bridges in Forth Crossing in Scotland, the Tate Modern in the UK, airports, Ferrari World in Abu Dhabi, you name it, a lot of things. But what we most of all like doing is seeing of how can we bring that all together. And that brings us now to the topic, and looking at smart and livable cities. I don't know exactly what's been discussed before here, but very interesting is in 1945, 2/3 of the world people lived in rural settings. And by 2005, the population balance has shifted. Half of humanity is now actually living in cities. In 2050, 2/3 of the population will be living in cities, more than 6 billion of them. Globally, 180,000 people are moving into urban space each day. That's 2 every second. And the problems this creates is enormous. Overpopulation, congestion, pollution, social issues, scarcity of water and energy, waste problems. More than 900 million people live in slums. If you breathe Mumbai's air, it's like smoking 2.5 packets of cigarettes per day. In the most congested cities, each commuter wastes over 65 hours in traffic every year. And these are just typical things. And I think one of the most impressive is by 2025, the citizens need to construct floor space equivalent to 85% of floor space in the cities what is globally available right now. So that's what has to be built again until 2025 in only 10 years, 85% of everything that exists. And that puts challenges up. And you can see the challenges that it creates and the problem that it creates globally. And therefore, we have to really look at how do we create livable cities, how do we create green cities and sustainable cities. And for us, it's very important. It's not everything the same. A lot of people talk about smart, green, sustainable, livable. And we distinguish this a little bit. And I'd like to start with livability. Livability, what does it mean? Basically, it's about improving quality of life. The term covers safety, health, affordability, participation, sense of place, and many other aspects of life, actually. Livable cities need a holistic, integrated, and balanced approach, both in terms of economic, social, environment, and spatial developments. And it creates the participation of the people who live in there. And this actually makes, I think, the cities in Denmark so successful, because really, how do you engage society in there? And I'm often on conference in the discussions about smart cities. You know, do you want a smart city? And the people, and you go to Asia and people say, I want to develop a smart city. I say, you don't want to develop a smart city. What you want to develop is a successful, livable city. Smart is an enabler. If you only concentrate on the smart, you have a collection of gadgets. You will not be successful. You can also create a clean city. If it's not livable, if it's not designed for the people, it will not be successful. You can see, actually, when you go to China, new cities being built into the ground in no time at all. They, yes, apply clean technology, but there's no places where you want to live. Let's start by an example you know, and that's Copenhagen, 1995, a city at that time what was not livable. And people didn't want to live in the cities. They moved out if you can. There was not much space for recreation. It was polluted. It was noisy. It was not the best place you wanted to be. And in the last 20 years, this is how it looks. I'm always amazed that the people actually do that even in the winter. I haven't become that Danish yet that I would do that. I live right next to that place. And it is actually how it does look in reality. And it is amazing. But that's what it is. It's a city where you want to live, that is successful, that is growing, that is striving, that's becoming clean. And therefore, by attracting more and more people, can afford to invest also more into sustainability and livability. And how's that done? And when we work together with the cities, we always concentrate that we really create a triple bottom line effect. That's by looking at how do we not only fulfill the primary purpose of a piece of infrastructure. How do we actually see what are not only those effects, but also the economic benefits, the social benefits, and the environmental benefits? And this is an example of how we measure that to make the choices of what is to be done. And that is a very important tool when you actually see how do you want to develop that city going forward. And I'll take a very simple example. It's not very high-tech, but it just shows how you can do things smart. And we'll start on with a problem that was in the city of Copenhagen, and that was actually the big cloudburst. I actually live very close to where that drowning car is over there. And my cellar and my house was also flooded. And it created 800 million of damage, euros, sorry, so 6 billion kroner in damage in that year. And the city said, we have to fix this. And the traditional solution, and you can make it clean, is to dig big pipes into the ground with filters and up into the ocean. Gone, that problem. But that's not how we approached it. This is part of the solution that we created here. There's this lake in the middle of the city. It's at the moment a square box, and it will look like this into the future. We've created an overall network across the cities with smart sensors that can see that there's a flooding problem, that can divert traffic and everything like that. But the heart of it is, how do we actually keep the water in the place and buffer it? And then we said, therefore, we will lower the water level of this lake in the city. We will create a park where people can live and recreate and enjoy themselves. We can make, therefore, the living area more attractive and more livable. And by the way, the city saved 134 million euros with this solution. So we didn't just put traditional engineering work into the ground. We created something that improves the livability of the life. And who wouldn't want to live in a place like this when you look outside of the window? And when it comes to the extreme situation, it looks like that. You can still use it. It will prevent the city from being flooded, and it will prevent the city from drying out in the summer, because also often you have got drought issues. And that we've applied now similar solutions to Singapore, the Bishan Park, which is one of the most popular places in the past, which used to be a big concrete channel. So when we go and look at these solutions, we have to see how does actually society, the economics, the environment, and the physical structure actually fit together, and how do we prioritize investments to make them successful. We then look at how can we help the cities to actually make those priorities and actually also put that successfully into place. That is probably the biggest challenge what cities nowadays challenge. Everybody has a master plan. Hardly anybody is so successful in implementing. The cities of Denmark are very successful in that because the structured way it's been done. And here's another example, and here we took livability to the city of Jeddah. Now, livability in Saudi Arabia is not the same definition of livability as in Denmark. There's a different understanding of it. Saudi women think livability is if they've got designated beaches where they can move freely and without views. The tribal spirit, which is still there, and needs to be considered because the culture is different. And we approached the city with quite a lot of experts across 15 disciplines and looked at an overall master plan, and it's about investing roughly $100 billion at that time, and to transforming this vastly polluted city into a more livable space. And the biggest challenges was there, actually, when we started to say, because they asked us, so how will we prioritize investments? This is expensive and that is expensive. What will the things cost? And we said, you're starting at the wrong point. You have to start your baseline actually considering the cost of doing nothing. Because doing nothing is not for free. Pollution costs a fortune. And at a point it becomes irreversible. Traffic congestion costs a fortune. So you have to, before you can make the investments, have the understanding actually what things are hurting you most at the moment without doing anything, including the investments that you have to make. And out of this came a big investment program with the aim to indeed transform it into a Saudi Arabian livable smart cities, combining again the way that the city is designed with technology, smart technology, and embedding it into the society. Here's actually, I would say, the best in class that we're currently working on. It's the NORDHAVN project in Copenhagen. It'll be a city for 40,000 inhabitants. It'll be CO2 neutral. It will be full of smart solutions like smart metering, two-way communications, virtual power stations, energy storage. But it will also embed the basics like district heating, a very efficient public transport system, but equal very innovative solutions like you can see a seaweed farm that creates bioethanol for energy production. It will be called the 5-minute city. Why 5 minute? Because it's designed around people and not cars, which essentially mean, sorry, that's when you have to click too often. It essentially means that you have 5-minute walk to the next amenity, next shop, school, doctor, or 5-minute walk to the next transportation, public transportation that will get you there. You can own a car, but it won't make you more efficient. The best option will be using bike, foot, or public transport. And that all is combined, therefore, in the smart design and a smart city and smart use of smart technologies. Now, there's also another point that comes to how you do these things, and that's doing smart financing of this. Because you might think this is going to cost a fortune. How the hell are we going to finance this? And there are examples of doing this, and I just want to, bloody hell, sorry for that. I want to show you how this is done now in these cases, developing these new cities. You start up with an industrial landscape, land that is not officially used, which has low value. In this case, it had €5 per square meter in value. And then you build up the development plan of the company. You change the zoning. You invite architects. You build the master plan, hopefully with Ramboll. And then you do one thing. You first of all build the metro stations. Traditionally, you build houses and you say, if we have enough houses, then we can afford a metro station and the infrastructure. No, we build the infrastructure. That's the upfront investment. Because that is important, because then you can sell the building rights and you sell them for €1,000 per square meter. With that, you reinvest. With that, you can actually invest into lovely living space and make it successful. There's one thing that's making Denmark, and specifically the Copenhagen region, but equally this city, Aarhus, very successful in the green transition. And that's what most of the world envy you about. And as a German, I speak often to my fellow Germans, and in Germany you speak a lot about Energiewende, they're becoming carbon neutral, and we German think we've invented it. I always tell them, sorry guys, the Danes did. And they've come much further than anybody else. And I'm taking this again at Copenhagen, because that's where I live, at the starting point. It starts all obviously that this takes a long journey, but it also, if you want to accelerate, you have to start also with a plan. And that means starting with a plan. How do you actually want to implement something like this? And in Copenhagen, this was done by really looking at all aspects of the city. Smart metering, smart design, smart technology, looking at traffic, at planning, bicycle lanes, etc., to make that successful. But there's something that's at the heart of it that makes it only possible if you really want to do it. And I'll come to that in a minute. But first of all, let's look at the discussions that often take place of, does that coincide with a successful financial development? And this is actually a nice curve. You see here the energy consumption of Denmark. It's been staying quite stable over the last years. But if you actually look at what happened to the CO2, it already went down across Denmark by 30%. At the same time, the economic development went up. So it shows you can do it. But the basic for that all is really concentrating also on the way that you transform your energy system. And this is the Energiewende that I talked about earlier, which Denmark started actually 30 years ago. You can do it faster when you know and you learn from this experience. You can see on the left side, very large producers. Best would be far away from the city. And you brought it closer to the city, closer to the consumer, so that you can combine actually the heat use and the power use. This is what's been created today, which is a very smart city that has a very large and integrated energy system. It combines the production and the use of power and heat. It provides 1 million citizens with this, and you can integrate clean and renewable energy from all kinds of sources, from obviously biomass, and over 50% of the power stations are now transformed also to biomass. But also even wind and solar. And this is actually what it looks like today if you really want to create this city, which is the backbone, because then only you can decouple the use of energy and power. And that is what you need to be able to do that. You create a system across the city. You integrate smart solutions like virtual power stations, heat pumps that you can again use electricity that you can switch off if there's a demand shift. You can control therefore consumers, and you can balance the system together. And even if there's surplus wind, you heat up water and storage tanks that you can feed into the city. This is the basic solution that actually has the biggest impact on the energy transition of the city. I've been told that I'm running out of time, so I'll jump a little bit about the wind and the solar part. It's enough that you know that it's in there. But this is one of my favorite projects, and I think only Denmark can do something like this. This brings it close to what you do with using technology in the highest form and combine it with livability, Danish design and architecture. And we're doing this project together with the Bjarke Engels group. You probably all heard of Bjarke Engels, a very inspiring man, I have to say, in that age to build something up like that. And he challenged our engineers and said, you know, he put in I talked to him about this project. He said, we actually put this project forward in the competition. We never thought we would win because it is so crazy. So we then got the job to execute this crazy idea, and that is actually to build a waste heat energy plant that looks as great as this, that you can put into the city, a waste to energy plant where people can walk on. You can even ski on it, and it'll be clean, and it'll be the most efficient in the world. It'll be 85 meters high, so finally Copenhagen even has a mountain, and people will live around it. Unthinkable in other countries. But why? Because it needs to be close to the city, otherwise we can't use the heat. But it needs to be accepted by the people. Yes, it costs a little bit more money, or quite a lot actually, because a design like that is not cheap. But it integrates it into the overall system, makes it successful. And with this kind of solutions, you create this positive cycle that the city has gone through. Basically, you increase quality of life, you create growth of the city, you create with that investments, and you can improve sustainability and affordability, which improves quality of life, etc., etc. Copenhagen did it, just the facts, quick slides. 25% growth since 1994. Greenhouse emissions down 40%. Energy and electricity down 10%. Water consumption down 36%. Waste down 19% just from 2006. And a 59% per capita decrease of CO2 emissions. No one else is that far anywhere. And that is combining smart design, smart solutions with an overall holistic approach. And the consequence is an improvement of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that run through, but a truly impressive one, both when it concerns Ramboll and of course the cases that you mentioned. Just one check. We have Jan Beyer, who's head of economic development here in Aarhus, who would be presenting the statistics from Aarhus. Is it right? Is Copenhagen better than Aarhus on all things? Okay.
But Aarhus
so
is also doing very fine, and if you look on the global scale, I don't think I wouldn't see it that much as a competition, I believe. But even though competition is good, so yeah. So
you prefer to see it as a second mover advantage. Now in the next leap, Aarhus will leapfrog Copenhagen. Okay, so let's take some quick questions here. So what you really want to know is this: how does your master plan strategy apply to the Danish wish of integrating the outskirts, so the periphery and the countryside? So, you know, most likely the political situation in Denmark is so that there's a concern that we're too preoccupied with Copenhagen, for instance, and then forget the rest. So how does the master planning of these, what they are, powerhouses of the economy and so on, how do they relate to the periphery of?
And that is very important, and that is a key element of the master planning. And I think if you look at the five-finger plan also of Copenhagen, that is exactly also...
Do you know the five-finger... These are business people, these are not urban planners.
Okay, all right.
The five-finger plan in 10 seconds.
Well, five-finger plan is really about that you ensure that when you move out to the corridors that you have, it's the transport routes that go into the cities, like five fingers. These are corridors, And you ensure also that that you concentrate around these corridors and that you still leave islands of green development in between, so that you don't have just this dirty belt that surrounds a city. And that is very important. So if we do a master plan, and we say that also to cities that are developing, you cannot just concentrate on your city center, because there will be a time when you want to go out. And therefore you have to also consider, how do you actually develop the outskirts? How do you connect also the longer distance commuting into the city to make that also successful? So it is a key element of a wider master plan indeed.
So what if you come past the 1 hour commute, so you're like the other end of the country, devolution?
Okay, now we're coming into, that is less...
Because I think it says like countryside also in the question. Since it is, so of course there's a sort of a gap between maybe interests.
That is true, and obviously the cities first and foremost often concentrate on how do they actually cope with the influx of people that are coming into the city. That is the most burning problem. But at the same time, interconnectivity with the further distances is important, and you can see that in Denmark and also in Germany, that by building up a good transport network that enables that, you can be successful in both cases. So I don't see it as a contradiction or a battle between cities and the others. The question is, however, and that is the biggest problem often, is the availability of funds. And obviously there's a tendency to concentrate them around the urban centers.
Right. So if we just take the next question there, could you imagine working with international institution in helping developing not just the countryside, but the developing parts of the world in this sort of Danish, if we can call it that, direction?
The developing side, you mean from less developed world, or you mean the countryside world?
Well, I take it that how can you as Ramboll even go out and not just work in the outskirts of Denmark, but actually in the outskirts of, you could say, the world scene from an economic perspective?
So we go out and we try to apply our solutions, but we don't try to copy Denmark. You cannot copy Denmark. There's only one Denmark, I have to say.
Well, we did take the Little Mermaid to Shanghai during the World Expo. Right?
But what you do is you learn from the experiences that you've gained in the Nordics and that we've gained globally. For instance, the waste energy plant. We've built over 70 globally, worldwide, and we're planning several of them in other places as well. But also at the case of JEDDAH that I showed. That is so far away from Copenhagen as you can probably think. It is the opposite in terms of the look and feel, actually. But the solution that we brought in terms of looking at the way that transport needs to be, or livability needs to be created, how we actually engage with the population to make it successful, that was very new. They had an American engineering company came in with a traditional, let's build, the concrete channels, and we said, no, let's go out, and we had to actually reach out through the elders of the tribes, the Guptas, and consult with them and talk about the priorities that they have and what actually livability needs for them, what are the needs, and then we brought in the technical solutions at the end of that process, discussed it with them, and then made together this prioritization plan, including the cost of nothing. So there's not one size fits it all, but you can use the solutions also on a global scale, also in less developed countries.
So last question before we take some questions here. So I would like to know, and many would, what differentiates Ramboll from, so the Danish, Covi, Niras, and so on, and the Arab of the world? I mean, what is different? So Arab is founded on, Danish. What is the definition or the characteristic that is different? Because it seems like you were very successful in what you do.
I think, first of all, there's things that are where we're quite similar. Arab is a very good engineering company.
Do you know Arab? Based in London, but founded by Ove Aarup.
Yes. Good engineering company, even though I'm very happy we needed to help them fix the roof on the stadium that they're building, but that's a different topic. But good company and very artistic architectural
You are being
engineering.
compared. I mean,
So I think what we bring in is exactly First of all, we've got a much wider holistic spectrum of services. And this, I think, makes us independent when we consult and when we go into master planning.
Okay.
We start with energy and buildings, transport planning, and all those things together. Only if you take this holistic approach, you make that successful. Also, we've got over 900 people in management consulting, specialized specifically also on 2/3 of them public sector consulting and how do you transform these? Because you can have the best plans you want. If you cannot move your society, you will not be successful. So you have to actually advise those cities together. And I think this is a great combination. At the same time, I have to say, the spirit and the values of the company are mind-blowing. And I was blown away when I came to the company, the pride actually of taking part of this. This drives our people, together with the empowerment. So if you come to the company, you know you can make a difference, you know you're empowered to do so, and that has been driving us. And it's been attracting companies who, and we just, for instance, acquired this company with 1,600 people in America, Environ, you could say kind of the McKinseys of the environmental world, and they were not for sale. But when they saw Ramboll, they said, you know what, we've been approached every week, but for the first time we can see a home. So, and that's why they came.
And just quick, a fraction to understand, so you're an engineering-based company, but how many are non-engineers? Business people, other kinds of people?
So we've got out of the 13,000, roughly 900 in management consulting. We've got, however, also on the engineering sides, you would have scientists, and there's in all flavors, and consultants. So we would say typically we've got out of the remaining population, 70% are what we call consultant, and that don't do any detail engineering, but really advising the clients, doing conceptual work. That is because that is a higher level, because the detail engineering often gets commoditized.
In say, India or somewhere.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you need some of that. We have that. We've got 1,200 people working in India doing that for us, so that we can afford the highly paid, high qualified people in Europe, together with the very cost efficient setup in India.
I went east last week, next to Ramboll project lead managing a team, well, in India.
Yeah.
So, some questions that are not up here. Anything that you want to hear more about? I mean, there are so many things. So how do you fit into this? Okay, so the integration of the business perspective. So one thing is to have a holistic engineering perspective, yes, okay, so you cover the fields, so to say. So we had Simon Giles earlier talking about interdisciplinarity, the role of design, complementarity in the teams.
Yes.
And especially across cultures. I mean, sitting and chatting with your colleague who was managing cross cultures, right?
Yeah.
Putting the right team together in India even. Getting the people not necessarily with the highest engineering grades, but actually those with cultural savvy. So how do you, as a leader, shape the organization to prepare for this more globalized? And
that's a big challenge, and that's probably the biggest challenge if you come into such a traditional company, to be very outspoken.
And you being the traditional company.
Yeah, for instance, also, we are a traditional company. We've got our roots, so people that are used to working in a very Scandinavian concept, and then there's the big dark world out there that you have to go out to. And moving out of this comfort zone, the word hygge is one of the first you learn when you come to Denmark, and I think I'll be remembered that
Did you say hygge?
Yes.
Right.
Sorry if I didn't pronounce it right. I
told
you. I warned you that it's not that good.
People still saying that.
And you have to move out of the comfort zone, what you're used to. And not everybody likes that, or let's say not everybody's at the beginning comfortable with that. Once you get a taste of it, however, the people then get excited. And there was, when we announced our strategy and our ambitions, because we had roughly 80% of our business in the Nordics and only 20% globally when we started 3.5 years ago when I joined. We're now nearly 50% globally. And that's not because we've shrunken in the Nordics, we've grown there equally. But that's because we've actually expanded much more. And there was half of the company that said, oh, this is great, yeah, let's go out. And half said, whoa. And that half you have to take across the board,
okay.
And there you have to take them with you, and you have to show what you achieve. And I think we've created a great momentum in the organization.
We got 1 minute for the 10-year question. So everyone here has been asked, so what's the outlook on the next 10 years? How will the definition of livability that the West has developed change? In 1 minute. Otherwise your cap will be gone and the 200 guests will be really sorry.
How will that change? That's a good question, and that is the point that you need to actually consider when you design a city. I will not answer it in that sense, as you might want to, because what you need to do if you make a master plan, you have to actually not base it on today's best practice. You have to think about what tomorrow's best practice could be. If we look, for instance, the impact of e-trade, today's cities are not designed for that yet.
You buying online with your mobile.
Yeah, you're used to going to shops, and you have these big shops with these big storage in the background. The future city might have different requirements. You go and look in the shop, but you buy the stuff online. You can have different logistical requirements that you come into the city.
Drones.
So all of these are moving parts that you have to give the flexibility when you design a city, that you can cope with that in the future of how it will look. What I think is important, that actually indeed livability and the human scale is coming more and more into the picture. At the beginning, sustainability was, it has to be green and clean. I think we are beyond that. It has to be a place where people want to be, because the Lord Mayors, they see, this will make my city more successful, and I can continue to invest and come into that positive spiral that we've
So what you're saying, this green and clean is not necessarily nice to live in?
Yes. You know, as I said, there's you go into specifically, I've seen a place in China, a city that's been built out of the ground with really state-of-the-art water filtering technology, waste water filtering plant, and sewage systems, and etc. But it was not a place where you wanted to live, because there was no human scale in it.
So stop using the windmill as the icon of the livable city. Use something that's on the human scale.
As the former CEO of a wind business, I'm a big fan of that, and we do a lot of that. I think it is a part of it, but indeed, a city is more than a windmill. That will not make you a city more successful. And it's actually quite ironic when the people say, let's be green, let's place a windmill into the city. It's the worst place to put a windmill. It's like next to the Bella Sky in Copenhagen.
That's because the planes come in. That's branding.
It doesn't work as well there, and you disturb more people. That can stay out.
Looks good.
I need to go.
Jens-Peter, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.